Yo guys, what's going on? Robert Warshack here. We're going to be going over the best decks since the huge balance patch. We had a lot of buffs. We had a good amount of nerfs. Paladin got hit, which is fantastic. Paladin was like literally conquering the meta. The best 3 decks were all Paladin decks. So glad to see that get hit. Mage got hit a little bit. Druid got hit a little bit. We had some buffs to like Rainbow DK, which was cool. We had a buff to Excavate Rogue, which was cool. A buff to Thief Rogue as well. So there's a lot of new decks. But the best decks right now, unfortunately, are pretty much the same decks that were the best decks in the previous meta because they didn't get hit good enough. But not to say that the stuff that got buffed, we're still refining that stuff. It's only been a day. So as time moves forward, we're probably going to see quite a few new decks popping up. I definitely see Excavate Rogue popping up. That was one of our high contenders for today. We did really, really well with that deck. The Scorpion is actually pretty sick now, especially. I'll show you guys the juicy deck we had earlier, but it's nice. So either way, this is the Dragon Druid with the Highlander package in it. I know there's duplicates in the deck. If you watch this past World Championship, this was one of the most brought decks there. And that's because it just has an insane amount of draw. And by the time you're getting to your Highlander cards, you've ramped and drawn enough that they're just playable. So while you can, again, there's a lot of duplicates in the deck, but everything kind of draws into each other. So if you've played ladder at all, you've seen this deck. It runs the early game dragon package, so you ramp, you do all the nature stuff because it even runs Topior in here. You run the Summer Flower Child to get some of your big boys. However, this is not your standard Dragon Druid, which is more of like a Curvestone deck, which is next. This is more of a control Highlander build. Really fun deck in my opinion. This is the Druid deck I would play if I'm looking for a really good time because it's just, there's a lot of things you can do with it, and there's a lot of really just fun combos with this deck, and it's really, really good. Moving down to the actual Dragon Druid that runs the Dragon Golem, which this is kind of the purpose of playing this deck. So you go ahead and you just do your 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 thing. You go ahead and you ramp. You play Snape Dragon, which buffs all the Battle Cry minions in the deck. There's a ton of Battle Cry minions in the deck. You can even take to the skies to draw dragons. Then on turn 5, you're playing the draw 2 cards that cost 6 or more in the deck. And then you're making Dragon Golem cost 6. You buffed him with Snape Dragon. He turns into like a 5/6 or a 4/5. And then you play this guy and then you just what? Super duper Curvestone. A lot of people are calling this like Clown Druid because it's very, very similar to like the old corrupt clown guy. That was pretty wonky as a Druid deck. Moving to the Aggro Demon Hunter. Again, whenever we get buffs and nerfs, there's just going to be the aggro decks that prey on anybody trying to play new cards. These decks, they just kill your opponent so fast that no new cards get to see play. And if their deck isn't just a well-refined deck, it's just going to punish it like crazy. This deck does run the Sharpshooter in it. So it's like all of the aggro portions of dealing huge amounts of damage, but it also has the huge Sharpshooter pop off as well. You have a ton of draw in this deck with like Magnifying Glaive. You have the Sightless. You got Momentums for huge damage. You have great early game like Biblimite and Slither Spear. So this is just one of those decks that you're going to win by turn 5 or 6, or you're losing by turn 5 or 6. And when everybody, I wouldn't say everybody, but when a lot of people are playing like testing out the new buff cards, they're trying to figure out what's good. This deck's just going to punish everybody doing that. So that's why you're going to see a lot of aggro decks, especially a lot of aggro Demon Hunter on ladder right now, trying to take advantage of those players trying to have fun with new stuff. All right, we've got Nature Shaman. This deck was very, very, very popular at this past World Championship. While it's gotten nerfed quite a few times over the course of its life, it got a few new cards with this past expansion, which is stuff like the Miracle Salesman, which is basically a 0 mana, do a shit ton of damage to your opponent. Very similar to like Sith Mage, if you're familiar with that. It's just, it does exactly what it did before, even with Bioluminescence at 4 mana. And they just, to compensate for that, they just run Jazz Base and then they just discount it to 0 anyway. So if you like combo decks, a lot of people having a lot of success at top 1000 Legend with Nature Shaman. It pretty much just kills you by turn 8-ish from whatever health you're at. It doesn't really matter. It can do upwards of 70 or 80 damage. Moving down to Rainbow Mage. Even though this deck did get hit, Arcane Worm is now a 1/1. It doesn't really matter. The deck still does good deck things. It kills you from whatever life from Civ. Well over 30 damage with civs, and then for some reason, I don't know how, they just never run out of value. The early game is always Cosmic Keyboard into like Coin Cold Case or Volume Up, and this just spirals into them drawing a shit ton of cards, summoning a bunch of minions, and then they can Elemental Inspiration, which almost kind of just wins the game sometime, and if that doesn't do it, they go ahead and kill you with a Civ OTK. So this deck has pretty much everything. The Mage can just do everything right now, and that's why it's just so very good. However, they did knock out the early game by 1 HP on the Mana Worm, but I don't think you're running Arcane Worm for the 1 HP it had. You're running it because it's just... it gives you a arcane bolt and it's a good minion. All right, so those are definitely the best decks right now, but moving to a deck I was playing today, and a lot of people you're going to probably see on ladder play, it's going to be the Excavate Rogue. So because the final Excavate card for Rogue got buffed, the Azurite Scorpid, now you don't have to excavate 8 times in order to get everything to 0. It just discounts the spells by 1 for each time you've excavated, but no less than 1. While that may not sound like it's that big of a change, it was huge. So what this deck can do, so my idea behind the deck, and it worked out, you'll see the games in a couple days when I played it, you Scourge Illusionist. This is going to allow you, when it dies, to draw Drilly the Kid at 0 mana because it reduces it by 4. So you have Drilly at 0, you play Drilly for 0, you get 2 treasures, you Shadow Step them, you play them for 2 mana. You've already excavated 4 times for 2 mana. From then, you're going to play Scorpion. You've got tons of bounce in the deck. We did this today. We were getting the Scorpion out anywhere between turn 4 and turn 6 very, very consistently. You'd be like, Rob, well, what happens if you draw your Drilly? That's a great question. I've solved this problem. Gear shit. So you play Gear shit. It shuffles back the Drilly into your deck as long as it's one of the leftmost cards in your hand, because it takes 2 of them, and then you go ahead and you can Scourge Illusionist. A lot of time you can even play Illusionist. Your opponent's not going to kill it because there's terror. They're terrified of it, and then you go ahead and make your hand put the Drilly back in the deck, and then you trade it off and then draw it immediately again. So there's a lot of really crazy things. On top of that, because we run all of like the bounce stuff like Breakdance and Shadow Steps and all that stuff, we run the Secret Package, because there's nothing better than thinning your deck a ton and then also being able to play the Ghastly Gravedigger. Right now, a lot of the Druid decks depend on having Nourish on 5 or the Dragon card on turn 6 in order to wipe you. So, because they're looking for very specific cards on very specific turns, let's play a card that disrupts that. And that's where the Ghastly Gravedigger comes in here. And you can just really tear apart your opponent's plans by dropping this, bouncing it, dropping this. So you can do the Scorpion value. You can do Gravedigger value. There's just a lot of things you can do with this deck. This is one of the most fun decks I think I've played in quite some time. It definitely took a while to build this. I think we played like 50 or 60 games until we came across this particular build here. And I believe we went like 8-2 with it upon its final rendition, which is, again, what you see here. Unfortunately, I was also going to play a Sludge Warlock because that got buffed today, but the Sludges are bugged. It says they do 4 damage with the buff. They still only do 3. So I didn't actually touch Sludge Warlock yet, but I'm assuming the Sludge Warlock, with them doing 25% more damage, they're going to be pretty good. Granted, probably still a meme deck, but we'll go ahead and try to build one of those once they fix that bug with it. So with that, hopefully some of these decks get you there this season. If there's a really good deck out there that I didn't go over, feel free to add that in the comment section below. Love to see you guys' deck ideas. And with that, as always, I'm Robert Warshack, and happy whatever the hell day it is.